My name's Jeff Moore, and I'm an alcoholic. Has he been doing this long? First day. It's good to see you, Tim. I've been sober since September 6th of 2001, and I'm very grateful for that today. It's good to be back at the Into Action Group. This place holds a very special place in my sobriety, and I'm very appreciative to Mike Erickson that day for breaking his anonymity to me. It was a jumping off point for really for the rest of my life. So the other things that I really liked about the Into Action Group was this room. This is just the greatest room to come and sit in, and even better to speak in. But I've been asked again. It's a privilege to be here and to share with you a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. My life today is a lot different than it was then, thankfully. I have this piece of paper that I'll probably not look at again, but I've taken it out and hopefully will stay somewhat organized. I grew up in Cedar Hill, Texas, and that used to be a real small redneck town that there was really not much to do in except drink and party and kind of run around. And I know that there's at least 2 or 3 people that could vouch for me on that, because a couple of them are my family members, and another couple I ran into at a homeless shelter downtown. So we didn't have a lot to do. A lot of people, when they tell their story, they talk about remembering their first drink and exactly what happened and how it made them feel, and really a lot more than I can remember. And candidly, I can't remember a lot of my childhood and high school and a lot of things. But I do remember the first time I drank. And for me, it was there were a bunch of older kids in my neighborhood that were out under the street light, and they were drinking beer. I didn't like the taste of beer. When I did take a drink of beer, I couldn't keep one down. I couldn't drink a beer without throwing up. And the one thing that I do remember when I took a drink of that beer is I felt a part of. I just suddenly felt like I belonged, and it made me feel a way that I couldn't feel on my own. I just couldn't get there. So from there, I was willing to muscle it down. I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to be a part of, and that's what I did. I was one of those kids that I was about the size of most seniors in high school my freshman year in college, right? I was always probably about 15 pounds lighter than everybody else, and Cedar Hill was a real small town, and I participated in just about every extracurricular activity that I could. But I really always felt less than. I was real intimidated by the other kids that were quicker and faster. I was usually the 6th man on the basketball team. I was junior varsity when the other guys were varsity, and I was real good on junior varsity. But it really just kind of played into just this whole feeling that really plagued me early on of just feeling less than. My family was not a real nuclear family, would be the way to put it. There was not a lot of cleaver going on in my household. My father is an alcoholic, and I'll come back to that. But essentially, he and my mom conceived me in a very young, early age in their life. And upon my arrival, my mother told my father that I do not want you around here. I don't want you or anything that you do around here. And so he was estranged from me at a very early age. I was adopted, just to give you kind of the background, I was adopted by a guy who gave me the last name Moore. He, in turn, was a Vietnam veteran back from 2 tours of duty of Vietnam and was a police officer. And about the time that I was 7 years old, he committed suicide. He, was one of those guys that was just had a lot of demons chasing him, and he and my mom had split up, and he just decided that he couldn't go through that anymore. I learned how bad that felt and what it felt to want to die, a little later on. But, from there, it was a very broken household. I was the man in the family. My mom went on to be married probably, I think a total of 5 times, and each of my stepfathers served their varying purposes in my life. Some were police officers who, made fun of me for being smaller and not being athletic enough. Some were, one guy would ground me and literally not talk to me for a period of 6 weeks. I mean, not a word. And as a kid growing up and as a parent now, I look back at that and, you talk about some validation that I wasn't good enough or that I was less than. I got a lot of that. my mother was always very solid and always there. They did, the Tom Moore that gave me my last name, they did have a daughter, so my sister, who thankfully has been sober about 7-8 months now and is in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. But, it was a real rocky time, and I was trying to find my place in life. And, growing up was just one of those, I had a psychologist, which I spent lots of money and time because I was going to figure it out, right? I was really going to figure it out. And, he said, you have really been through an emotional war. There are people, the psychological abuse and things that went on were really serious. And my, as a good alcoholic does, tendency was, I'm fine. It's all good. I'm the man of the family and I'm solid. And, so that carried into high school, and in high school was when, things really started to pick up. Drinking became more a part of my life. I'd leave at 7 a.m. with my best friend from high school, and we'd drive over to a real bad part of town. And if we couldn't get what we want over there, we'd go over to my parents' liquor cabinet, water down whatever we took from that, and then we'd go to class, right? So, it was one of those things that, you did in high school, and the consequences and the stakes were pretty low. From there, there's a member of my group that says, I'm powerless over anything that makes me feel good, and that really is the case with me. I latched on to a girl in high school that I was pretty sure was somebody that I had to have, and that I was going to die if I didn't have, and nobody else could have her, and it was just a real unhealthy thing. I, again, was making my 7 a.m. runs and drinking and partying just about as much as I could. My sister was really struggling with a lot of the marriages and things that had gone on, because whereas I had kind of just keep my head down, be the man of the family, she was looking for a daddy in all those stepfathers that we had, and she really, really took it hard when they left. I was, everything was really very progressive, much as our disease is. And even then, things were spiraling out of control. I mean, my solution to the way that I was feeling was to medicate them, and to do that either by drugs, alcohol, or some girl, or just anything to make me feel different than the way that I feel. I mean, inside I was really ripped apart. My sister one day, my senior year in high school, decided that she didn't want to live anymore, and I came home, and very fortunately for me, one of my last stepfathers was a physician, and we lived a pretty nice life compared to what we had lived the years prior to, and so we lived in this real nice house, and I had this boat, and it was a lot of fun, and I came home to get the keys to the boat because we were doing some things, and I yelled up to my sister, who emotionally was crying a lot and really upset a lot, and heard this. I was like, God, what was that? And I sat there for a second. About the time I heard that, I heard her start screaming. As it turned out, as any good redneck family has, right, we've got guns and we keep them unlocked, and my sister had decided that she was going to shoot herself. And so I was the only one home at that time, and I go to run up the stairs, and about the time I'm going up the stairs, she's coming down, and very vividly I remember she had on a white sweatsuit and had shot herself in the stomach and was bleeding. Care flight landed in our front yard. They blocked off the street, and I had about 140 kids in my graduating class in high school. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew what was going on, and I was pretty popular, relatively, right? I don't mean that in a bragging way. It was just a small town. So everybody knew, right? So my sister was incarcerated at Brookhaven, and then this was the mid '80s, and treatment was fashionable, and my stepfather had a lot of money and a lot of insurance, and so my sister went to Timberlawn, and that really started my path to really just accelerated drinking and alcohol use and just overall craziness. By the way, how much time do I have? Till 9:30. Okay. So it was my senior year in high school. I was very codependent on this girl. I was drinking like a fish, and everybody else around me was drinking like a fish, and I was just an emotional loose end. I mean, I was just raw. And there were times when my mom told me I wasn't going to see this girl, and I wrapped my hands around my mom's throat in an effort to choke her because she wouldn't give me the car. I found myself down in East Texas one day with a 12-pack of beer, racing back to Dallas, and was going to see this girl who said that she was going to date somebody else, and I was drunk, and I ended up at her house, and this is my senior year in high school, right? I'm not even to the good stuff yet. And, I get this big dramatic thing. I mean, it really got crazy. I'd drink and I'd run around with a loaded shotgun threatening to kill myself in front of this girl. Just incredible things, really incredibly crazy things. But I went over to this girl's house and I said, "You're not going to go out with anybody else, and I don't want to live anymore." And I reached down and I grabbed this pair of what I thought was kindergarten cutting scissors, and I was going to put this big drama thing on, right? And I go, whack! Well, as it turns out, they were hair cutting scissors, and they were very, very sharp. And, parents are just, they're just so, they're just wonderful people. I had an 82 Cutlass Brougham with, those velour seats that really reflect those burn holes real well, right? I mean, this was going on for 2 or 3 years, right? And my mom never really mentioned that she knew that there was a problem, not to mention the overpowering smell of Polo cologne and the empty bottles of Visine and the liquor bottles, and she just didn't have a clue. But I cut myself. I cut my wrist really badly, and to the point that this is a problem, and I can't hide this. And my mother's a nurse, and the stepfather was a physician, and I walk in with this. I cut it on a gas pump coming back, and yeah, I smell like beer, but we got to do something about this. So I go to the emergency room, and much to my surprise, they give me a drug test. What do you mean drug test? I had a few beers, but it was a drug test. And right about that time, I was again willing to do just about anything that would make me feel different. And things were I was running out of runway real quick. I was running out of excuses. I couldn't hide the emotions that I had from all the years of all the things that had gone on, not to mention what had gone on that year. And we started seeing a family therapist across the street from Timberlawn, and I don't know if you guys have ever been over to Timberlawn, but at that time it's a psychiatric hospital, long-term, substance abuse, adolescent, men only. It's a mental hospital, not somewhere a real popular senior year in high school kind of, I got this girl and I'm not supposed to be here, right? So I had agreed to go see this counselor that we were seeing. He said, maybe you ought to consider coming in for a little bit. And I said, how long? He said, well, maybe about 6 weeks. And by that time, I was already behind the locked door, and it was too late. They weren't going to let me out. So here I am in this psychiatric hospital surrounded by these crazy people, because at that time it was I don't remember, it was either middle or long. It wasn't a real long term, but it wasn't pure substance abuse. It was for, crazy people. And much to my surprise, I found out I was one of them. So, as we do, I learned how to talk the talk real quick, and ironically, my sister was 2 units over. And that story gets even weirder. But so I'm on this inpatient substance abuse program. The jig is up. I got no drugs, no alcohol, no girlfriend that I know I need, regardless of whether or not she needs me and who else she's with and all that. I got to have this girl, right? So about a week into it, I think, okay, I'm going to drink a lot of coffee and I'm going to change my look up. I talk my way to go to the cafeteria and get out from behind the locked door. I go to the cafeteria. I'm real nervous, and the mental health worker, you go in what was called GA at that time, group accompaniment to the cafeteria, right? I'd graduated. I hold the door open just like a smiling, hey, after you. Slam that door, and I was gone, boy. I just hauled out of there and ran across the cemetery, hid in the filing cabinet, and worked my way back to Cedar Hill. All my friends were in school, and here I am riding a 10-speed with flat tires in between this girlfriend's house with the sheriff looking for me because I had escaped from a mental hospital. Keep in mind, at this time in high school, I'm president of the art club, photo editor of the annual staff, running track and being pretty good, right? So I'm just thinking, God, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not. You don't understand. I'm not supposed to be here. So needless to say, again, treatment was fashionable, and my stepfather had a lot of money, and I was in Timberland for 10 months. They caught me. Frankly, I just about surrendered, not knowing it, but 10 months was a long time, and I had a lot of work to do and a lot of resentments around that some I'm good with and some I'm not, but it is what it is. From there, I got out of Timberlawn and I was hell-bent for leather to prove to everybody that I was normal. And I went through a treatment program that addressed specific issues around drugs and alcohol. It was, a concentrated, hardcore, high dollar, 8 hours a day, your family members are here, substance abuse program. And it didn't take. I got a job in the restaurant business. I don't drink much in the restaurant business, do they? I started waiting tables, went to community college, and started working my way through school. I was fortunate enough, again, via the stepfather, that my tuition was paid, and I worked in a restaurant and worked my way through school. College was a blur. I partied like a rock star. I drank like a fish. I fell asleep at the wheel going down Greenville Avenue. I actually own a light pole at Caruth Haven in Greenville Avenue, for anybody who doesn't know. I've got a scar on my face. I've got cartilage fractured all off my right ankle. And my biggest concern after that wreck was, where are my Revo sunglasses? Where are those glasses, I'm on crutches for a month. I got 3 months I'm on crutches. I got another girlfriend at that time. She's hauling me back and forth to Richland. I'm still going to college and still doing what I need to do, and just not real convinced that I've got a problem. About that time, one of the things, let me back up a little bit, when I was 17, 18 years old, I'd gotten out of Timberlawn. My mom decided to break it to me, given the solid frame of mind that I was in just out of the psychiatric hospital, that Tom Moore was not my father, was not my natural father. My natural father was actually a guy named Randy Levins. And Randy Levins, by the way, lives in Duncanville. And when I took you to Polar Bear Ice Cream there to get ice cream, that lady across the counter was actually your grandmother. And that was me taking you to see your grandmother because, she couldn't see you otherwise. And that kind of hammered me a little bit. It kind of freaked me out a little bit. That story has been pretty incredible. So I'm in college flipping cars, doing crazy things, and my dad contacts me. He's trying to get sober, and we end up sitting out in front of my grandparents' house one night, and he's trying to make his amends to me. And he is trying to do the right thing, work his program, and make an amends. And I'm just going, whatever, dude. I gotta go. I gotta meet some friends, and whatever you got going on. This emotionally, I couldn't deal with it. I just couldn't deal with it. I didn't want to deal with it. I was still trying to prove I was normal, and obviously this father I know for a long time didn't fit real well into that picture. Flipped a car on 75 on my way home one night, just absolutely smashed. I ended up with a scratch on my back, climbed out of the car. 5 people pulled over to talk about how fast I was going and almost cutting them off. Police officer said, "Have you had anything to drink?" And I said, "Absolutely." There's just no way I could hide it. Talked my way out of it because somewhere along the line I managed to call this girlfriend and said, "Hey, my car's upside down in 75. You need to come get me." He releases me to the custody of my girlfriend. I really kind of talked my way out and near-death my way through about 5 DWIs, not to mention the people I could have killed, not to mention the injury that I did to myself, but I didn't really have a problem with drugs and alcohol, right? So my last 2 years of college, I applied to University of Colorado at Boulder, and the stepfather that had been so gracious and floated me this far said, "Hey, whatever, get out of town. Let's just go to University of Colorado at Boulder." I lasted about 3 weeks being away from the girlfriend that I just absolutely had to have at that time, and I came home. Walked in the door one day after my mom had moved me up there. We looked at the school and just, "Mom, I'm home." "What are you doing home? You're supposed to be in Colorado." So needless to say, I burned that bridge a little bit and ended up finishing school here in Dallas. And I graduated school with what better but a psychology degree, right? Gonna figure this out, right? Gonna figure this out. So it was pretty much pedal to the metal, I'm going to be normal. So much so that my first job out of college with that psychology degree is that I went back to Timberlawn Psychiatric Hospital, became a mental health specialist on the very unit that I was incarcerated at to prove that I was normal. I was going to slay that dragon, right? I just wasn't supposed to be there. That was really probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life. It was 12 months of just, it was just very powerful. I mean, the unit that was just kind of a psychiatric unit at that time had turned into a substance abuse unit, and I worked with people who 2 weeks before were very successful attorneys, and 2 weeks later had burned through their practice, their family, 60% of their body weight, and had nothing left. I had the opportunity to work with a girl that I went to college with who was an alcoholic, just couldn't get it right, and ultimately was discharged and ended up killing herself in a hotel room. So right in front of my face was the very seriousness and ugliness of the disease that we have, and I couldn't deal with it. We worked 7 to 3, and by 3:30 we were at White Rock Yacht Club drinking beer, and I drank, and you only make about $5-6 an hour with a bachelor's in psychology at a psychiatric hospital, by the way. And so I was working at the restaurant at nights. I was working at the same restaurant at night. So I'd work 7 to 3 with drug addicts, alcoholics, and ultimately, psychiatric patients. Go 5 o'clock to the restaurant, start drinking by about 10 o'clock, party down at Deep Ellum all night long to show up smelling like a rose at the psychiatric hospital at 7 a.m. the next morning working with drug addicts and alcoholics. It's just a nutty time. But I mean, the poor little pothead that was trying to hide a roach from me, on that treatment center, I'm just like, kid, you're way outgunned here, Let me see inside the brim of that hat, because I know that's where you're hiding it, right? But my drinking really did accelerate, and my substance abuse really accelerated. One of the things that came from that job at Timberlawn, right about that time, I realized that I wasn't going to make the kind of money that I should be making, and I resigned. But they let me resign stuck around for about a month, and they hired a person in to replace me. And that person that they hired into, fast forward to today, is my wife. She has her master's in clinical and family counseling, and probably is even a licensed chemical dependency counselor, I think. And she was the person they hired in to take my place at Timberlawn. I had about 3 or 4 other relationships going on at the psychiatric hospital campus with employees, not patients. And, and I meet and I walk in and here's this girl and I'm just like, whoa, this is the one. And, so, I kind of cover all my bases with the other and we start dating and, she knew, she just said, normal people don't drink 10 beers in a football game. And, it's 4 a.m. Why aren't you tired? And where have you been? And this was kind of the thing that we started getting into. But she loved me. And I developed that, I don't know that it was the same healthy codependency. Maybe it was. I don't really know. I burned through 4 or 5 jobs. I was always a guy that was able to stay shiny enough on the outside that right about that 2-year mark, before people realized that I was at my office 4 a.m. drinking and doing all these other things, working, of course, according to my wife, right? I'd leave. I'd leave those jobs. And, one of those last jobs was with a company in the wireless business. And things were spiraling out of control. I had gotten the exposure that I'd gotten at Timberlawn to substance abuse and to my dad who was doing his amends. And I knew something was wrong. I just, I knew that it was a problem. I knew what alcoholism was, and I was so hell bent to prove that I was normal that I was just dying inside. I grew up in the Methodist Church, and I had absolutely no faith in anything. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in any, God was somebody who punished me for all the bad things that I did. I was a predator. I was into the relationship for what could I get from you. Either materially, financially. If it was a woman, Katie barred the door, I'd say anything to do what you had, to get what you had. And I didn't care. But as I really do believe that most alcoholics are, we know we're doing something wrong. And I knew what I was doing was wrong. And I knew that I just had this big hole inside, and the only thing that would fill it was drugs and alcohol. And so I drank, and I drank, and I drank some more. And, my wife, bless her heart, stuck around, I was happy to find out that she was just as sick as I am. But, one of the things, One of the things that Mike didn't tell you was I met Mike. I was, my big thing was business trips. I had worked my way up into those sales jobs where they gave you airline tickets and a credit card and said, we trust you to go do your thing. And I drank on the road, and I drank on airplanes. And, I got to go to Mexico and, all these places where I got to really just go at it. Mike didn't mention, but the golf course that we had that conversation on was actually in New Orleans. And I had spent an entire week not only arguing with my wife on the phone about how it's 8 o'clock and you're already drunk, because you could tell, you'd make that call before you got real drunk and it got real late, and she knew, and things were just out of control. At that time, we were in New Orleans and I watched Mike. One of the things that I'm so thankful about is that you guys at Into Action walk the walk, and the message is clear. And I watched Mike Erickson while I just partied down in New Orleans, not drink. And I'm like, dude, it's a week before Mardi Gras. What are you what? What's up? Maybe there's something to this. And we did have that conversation on the golf course that day because I had bottomed out what I thought. I really, it was getting to the point to where the stakes were high. I was married and she was talking about leaving and I was just miserable. Much in the same way I agreed to go to Timberlawn all those years back. I ended up sending an email to Mike saying, I think I've got a drinking problem and I need some help. I came to Into Action and came to this group and came to these meetings and sat down and promptly started looking at the differences, of all the people and how, man, I'm not like that guy, and I'm not, I haven't really lost all that guy has. I hadn't been to prison, but one of the things that did happen in that time, I think the most time sobriety I put together was about 90 days, and in 90 days I established a conscious contact with a higher power, and I never had that before. My sponsor talks a lot about you were always around God but never really knew God, and that was very much the case with me. I went on a business trip to Antigua, of all places. I was supposed to pick up my chip, my 90-day chip on, I guess it was a Friday night, right? It was a Friday night meeting, and I was supposed to pick up my chip. My wife was going to be here, and at this business trip in Antigua, where we had 2 hours of work and, 24 hours of no work, I drank. I drank, and that was probably on a Wednesday, and I took an airplane back here to pick up my chip on Friday night, and I stood in front of a room full of people in this room and picked up my 90-day chip, knowing that I had drank 2 days before, and I just was miserable. The first thing to go was that conscious contact with God, and suddenly I was less than, I was all alone, I was a liar, a cheat, I didn't belong, and I didn't have anywhere to go. Cat was out of the bag. I've been in AA, man. That's just, you can't unadmit. You can't unadmit that you're an alcoholic and that you've got a drinking problem when you admit it. So, told my wife, I had actually convinced her, I think at that time, that, I'm not really like those people. Yeah, I think you're right, So I went back out. I think it came to be known as actually the day that I resigned from the Into Action group. I didn't want to have to see anybody, I didn't want to talk to anybody. There was about 5 or 6 people, Brother Moore included, that I fired an email off to, in a true stand-up way. Put a little distribution list together and said, I may be done, I may not be done. Love you guys, but I won't be back. At that time, my wife and I had my first daughter, who is now almost 5, and I went back out and was drinking, and next thing you know, the drinking turned into happy hour 5 days a week, and I was ending up at ATM machines at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, and it was just out of control as quick as it had ended. And I came in one day. I had been at a gentleman's club. There's an oxymoron. Since about noon on a Tuesday, and my wife wanted to go to Bible study that night. My daughter was probably 3 months old, and I came in just really, really nice, really smelling good, and my daughter was in the bathtub, and, babies, when they're that age, you have to feed them right before you put them to bed so they'll sleep, 3 or 4 hours at least. So my wife and I have World War III, and she goes to her Bible study, and I had come home with a pocket full of stuff that I wasn't done with, and all I wanted to do was get that kid in bed so I could finish, what I was doing, which I did. My wife comes home, we have World War III, and in my paranoid, drunken, crazy fit, I'm going to sleep in the nursery because I know she's going to take that kid, Where's she going to go, with a 3-month-old? About 4 in the morning, the baby wakes up screaming her brains out, just crying and crying, and I hadn't been, I'm just laying there, and she comes storming in, and she says, "Didn't you feed Natalie before you put her to bed?" And I didn't have a clue. I had no idea. And that was the big dramatic story that I needed to sober up. It's impacting my kids. It is a problem. She was right. I've already tried to admit and unadmit and all that. And I was drunk 4 days later. I just was drinking again 4 days later. So, I started again. As a lot of people, say, when it came time for me to, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous initially because my wife was going to leave and the kids were going to leave and all that stuff was going to be gone. And there was a lot of fear associated with that, and that's kind of what motivated me to get in and kind of latch on. But, what kept me here was something a lot different. I had bottomed out, knew that there was something wrong, and that I didn't like the way my life was headed. I was miserable. I was dying inside. My wife hated me. I had this kid who was bound into, she was going to end up like I grew up. I'm going to leave, and it's just, we're doing it all over again. So I started trying to sober up, and as much as a lot of people say, I really do believe that world events kind of happened for me in a way that I got sober. I got sober on September 6th, and as everybody knows, 5 days later, the events of September 11th occurred, and that was really 2 weeks of purely selfless thought. I mean, it just had a big, powerful impact on me, and which was weird because anything else outside of here really had never had a powerful impact on me. My daughter at that time was doing good. We had a second daughter, and she's 3 now. But at that time, I was starting to get the deal. I had picked up a couple more Desire chips. I started going to Dallas North because I was ashamed of coming back here, and had a great Sunday one day and picked up. We've got about an 80-pound German Shepherd. I had at that time a 2.5-year-old, and then we had my baby daughter, and it was a beautiful Sunday. And I had come back, and I was actually with my dad. And I'll work my way back around to that story. It was, we were going to cook out that night. My wife, I said, "Hey, I'm going to take the girls for a walk." So I had my baby daughter, and I had my 2-year-old who wanted to walk, and then I had the dog, and we're going to go around the block, right? Well, 3 houses down, the 2-year-old decides that she doesn't want to go around the block anymore. She wants me to hold her. So I reach down to pick her up. She flails around, and I drop my other infant daughter. As I'm going out the door for this walk, my wife says, "You really ought to put her in a stroller." And I'm like, no. Well, it ended up that probably one of the worst days of my life, I had fractured my daughter's skull and spent probably 9 hours in the Baylor Richardson emergency room where the nurses were 300 pounds, nobody was in a hurry, and the doctors didn't speak good English. And I sat there in that bed with that infant baby, and I knew in my heart of hearts that the half measures way that I approached everything in my life, inclusive of my jobs, my sobriety, and everything, had just revealed itself right there in that moment. That I should have put that kid in the stroller, and that's just the way that I led my life. And my sponsor, I called him, and he said those kind of things happen, but I knew, I knew, it was that same 60% of effort that I do everything in my life, and that was the result of that. And then finally I got a phone call saying that I was going to be laid off in about 2 months, and this all happened, that first and second month of sobriety for me. My wife and I were actually forced to sit down on the couch and be a team and talk about, we've got these 2 kids and what are we going to do and how are we going to do it, and, cutting and running and drinking and drugs, that stuff doesn't play well anymore. And so, by the grace of God, here I am today, still sober. Back to the story about my father. We had my second daughter, and I had just kind of gotten to the point where I was sober, and I'd realized, his grandparents had kind of suffered enough. He had gotten married again, and that wife and 2 kids just disappeared as a consequence of his alcoholism and the behavior that goes with that. So I just decided, enough's enough. It's time to engage that piece of my life that I really didn't have the spiritual tools or the ability to deal with at that time. My dad is probably 12 years sober now. This is a guy that I pretty much grew up saying there's no way in hell I want to be anything like that man and all the things that he's lost and, that miserable failure. And I can definitely say that man has more today than I can only hope to have a fraction of what he has in his life. And it's not material, it's spiritual. It's because of Alcoholics Anonymous. He's got a son that's, he married a gal that's probably 4 years older than me, and he's got a son that's now 4 years old, and babe, this is your brother, and I'm like, but trying to explain that to my daughters, but it's just been, it has been, that's my family, that is my family, and it is such a blessing today. It's such an unbelievable blessing. First night I told my story up at my home group. I called my dad, and, he's a drunk just like me. He's got the same fears and the same worries and the same insecurities that I do, and it's just as much work for him to call me as it is for me to call him. And every time we talk, it's like a God deal. My sponsor calls them God winks. And when I'm doing my, when I'm going to meetings and I'm in the program and I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, those things happen in my life in other ways. But first time I told my story, I was on my way up to Into Action Group, and I called my dad. It's the first time I talked to him in months, and it was his 10-year birthday that day. And I didn't have a clue. So it was kind of a neat thing, and that's a neat part of my life. Today. When I started trying to sober up at Dallas North, I finally got, I got into that, what was important then is not what's important to me now. You go to groups and you run around, how it's like, hey, how you doing, and, I found myself being really worried about what I was wearing to AA meetings, so I was a little derailed as to why it was that I was there. But I relapsed and got right-sized and picked up a desired chip and came back at it again. Today my life is, I am very, very blessed, and a lot of that is directly related to the foundation that I established for my sobriety here at the Into Action Group. One of the things when I started coming to this group that I said, man, I'm never going to bring my kids to an AA meeting. And, Mike and Karen and the example that they've set, I wouldn't have my kids anywhere but an AA meeting. We have 4th of July fireworks watching parties at our home group, and my kids are there. And I hope that this program is here in its current form. If my children do, heaven forbid, have the problems that I've had, whereas before it would be, let's just keep them in this box, and hopefully, they won't have those problems. The other thing that I really was surprised to find out is that marriage is work. I just, where's the picket fences, and why aren't we having sex 3 times a week when I want to, right? And by the way, why don't my kids do what I do when I tell them to do it just because I tell them to do it? That's just not life. Alcoholism for me is I've heard that it's a disease of relationships, the way that I relate to the rest of the world and the way that I relate to other people, and that very much has been the case for me. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me that life does not happen to me, life just happens. Accidents happen, bad things happen to good people, all the little, things that you hear. They really, really do. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the humility to realize that I'm just a spoke in the wheel, and I don't have to be the wheel. And that's really quite a bit of pressure off because, life, God kind of has a way of right-sizing you, and this program has a way of keeping that humility if you do the things that are laid before you and you do what's suggested. And, I'm always inclined to move farthest away from the things that work. I am very, very happy that I've got to do the same things today that I had to do the first day I got sober. It's the same thing. It's not any better or any worse or any more or any less. It's the same thing. It's right there, right? It's right there, and I need that kind of clarity. I really do. I need somebody to tell me that it's my responsibility to share my experience, strength, and hope, and only that. No more. No more. The rest is, it's God's work, right? It's ironic for me tonight just that I'm talking in a church because, I found myself in this position with Alcoholics Anonymous that I couldn't really reconcile my church God and my higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous. At 2 years sober, I was probably as crazy as I was 2 weeks sober. I was just to the point that I just couldn't figure it out, and I needed to quit trying to figure it out. I just needed to do, and I needed to be of service, and more will be revealed to me. We're involved in our church now. It's a wonderful thing. I can't sit still, nor do I know that I agree with everything that's shared there, but I'm involved because it's the right place for my kids to be. It's not because of whatever spontaneous publicity I think that I need to get, right? It's the right thing to do. I do things today because they are the right thing to do, regardless of what I think you're going to think, right? I actually have an opinion in the presidential election this year, whereas before, my entire life and everything I did was based on what I think you think I should think, right? And that's just a miserable way to live and not a good way to be happy. So, I'm out of time. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and to have this program and I'm very thankful for all the gifts that I have today. Thanks.